All right.
It's a good,
Well,
good start
hey,
out
thanks
for
for
it.
joining us tonight. It looks like, hey, are you in Kelowna right now? I can see that looks like a beautiful lake behind you.
Yeah, I live in West Kelowna. That is actually a lake that's about a 2-minute walk from my house.
Oh, I thought you were there. It's like right now you're still small screen for me, so I was, just
No, no, it's a little darker
that,
than what's
that's fair.
behind me.
That's fair. All right. Well, so what I want to do, and actually, Josh, I don't. Are you okay? We're going to record it. You can review the tape after if we do anything with it. But we just, in case anyone can't connect, we like to have that. So, Josh, have you got permissions? Are you able to do it? Oh, we are recording. I'm even seeing that now.
Yeah,
Look at my attention to detail. The recording button's on. Well, hey, there's that. But for the purpose of it, I do want to kick things off by again addressing that. We are located on unceded territories, and we've been addressing this over the last few weeks and making everyone aware that we have much to do in acknowledging things that we can do to build better bridges with our First Peoples, our Indigenous communities, and the MDM is going to continue to do this. I know Kelowna is in a specific region that I'm not prepared to address which nation it's connected to, but I'm making a mental note to make note of it myself. So
I personally am still working on my pronunciation. It's horrible at this moment.
Okay, well, that's admitting that we have things to that we're working on and learning is part of that as well. So it's the Dave, I was I was reminiscing a little bit before you joined us that we've been connected for many years. I even there was a Penny connection too. My cat's name's Penny, but I also worked with Penny Elton in the PR days back at the Art Institute there, which she's got the same last name as you now. She didn't back then, so
Yeah,
that kind of happened.
Going well.
So,
she's just over there right now.
Oh, nice. Well, say hi to Penny for me. That's awesome. That's good to see. But so tonight it really is sort of a great opportunity this is our 16th cohort that you're meeting. Students are joining us from all around the world. Again, I'm always interested in seeing where everyone's coming from and how this program brings everyone together. But I'm also really interested in our industry guests like yourself that make time to give back and share a little bit about your background, your current happenings, and just keeping that connection alive for the future connections and things that we can do. So just expressing my gratitude for you joining us tonight. And I'm a fellow Ontario boy myself. I think you went to Guelph U or something. I was at York and Sheridan. So I kind of was looking at a little bit of your journey there too. I know you've got a lot of Toronto ties that you continue to have, but you're back in. I'm using Vancouver very loosely because I know you're in Kelowna now. But but yeah, why don't you? I did share your bio, but why don't you, for the interest of the class, just tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're on camera with us today.
Absolutely. So I would consider myself as someone who's had a very fortunate career. I've been able to see some very exciting things and have been able to fulfill a number of different types of roles over the course of my career. It is over 25 years. I don't know where it is, 26, 27, 28, somewhere around there. And making games, I started back in the 16-bit days. My first game that I worked on was Dragon's Lair for the home systems. So back at the days of the single speed CD-ROM drives.
Nice.
And yeah, data throughput wasn't very good back then. I actually started off as a project manager, having no training as a project manager previously. I did go to the University of Guelph, but the degree I was working on was theater. But
there are so many people that have theater backgrounds that are in this space. I mean, even Stuart Butterfield, like from Slack. I mean, he's a theater grad, right? And Jerry Sinclair, the founding director of our master's of the program, she's a theater major.
I think what it is that everyone understood, came to the same realization as me. And that was, I didn't want to wait tables for the rest of my life. So I better go get a real job. And video games is something that was a bit of a rising star even back then. So that's the direction that I took. For me, it actually started, my dad worked for IBM, so we always had a computer in the house. He took a number of trips to some of the Japanese divisions, and so came back with Nintendo Game and Watches for us to play. The head office being in New York. The first test market for the Atari 2600, he brought one of those home. So I've been playing games right from the very beginning, and while I started making games not quite at the beginning, it was probably close enough for it to almost count these days. But like I said, I believe I've had a very fortunate career in that I've been able to do a number of different types of things, from project management to game design to business development. I've run teams large and small on smaller indie type games all the way through to massive franchises. And I've worked Toronto, Vancouver, Victoria, BC, Salt Lake City, Utah, Seattle. So a little bit all over in terms of Canada and the US.
Yeah, and I mean, again, it's kind of interesting that it's the growth from a project manager that are least embraced in project management, moving up the ladder, right? And staying sort of in the entertainment space. I am going to touch on the Dreamcraft and like where theater, that themed attraction kind of comes in later on too. But yeah, it's the journey is definitely, it's interesting. But you've also, I mean, you've moved around a fair bit, and not only in roles but in companies and location. So what spawned that? Was that sort of interest or opportunity? Was that just you wanted to hop and try something new? Like what, how, because it's funny, I had, it's not, people don't have that typical 20-year at one company role anymore. It's we had guests last week that were saying the same things, and I was just looking at your LinkedIn history, and it's kind of sharing some of the same. But yeah, what spawned that path for you? Like what was the step?
I've had definitely sort of different types of experiences. I've had a total of 12 years at Electronic Arts. First 7 years and then 5 years stints. But the changes, the reasons for the changes have been a bit of a variety. So as an example, the reason why I left EA the first time was opportunity. It was a situation where there wasn't much of an opportunity for me to continue growing upwards. The senior staff was there, none of them were leaving. So that was an opportunity for me to sort of take on new roles and responsibilities, where I took on the design position for an entire studio, so oversaw a number of
Silicon Knights back in Ontario, right? Was that the transition? Correct. From yes, yeah,
absolutely. Some cases it was for family. It was actually a situation where we were looking for a better opportunity for my wife. And generally, I try to be as straightforward and honest with the companies as I'm leaving, sort of why that is. And in one of those particular cases, it was EA. I moved down to Seattle to go work for Microsoft, but that was meant to be an opportunity for my wife to have a better potential work environment. Explain that to EA. So when decided that it actually wasn't going to be a better work environment, wanted to move back to BC, EA welcomed me with open arms. And
so it's a great thing to touch on here too, because it was like, obviously you left in the right way and you were able to return. It's just something I like to bring up on calls like this too, because that idea of don't be a jerk at work, or don't burn any bridges, don't be that guy, right? So and you weren't, obviously, or it's you want to be somebody that you want to work with, and people want to work with you. So I mean, that's obviously something you were able to do effectively. So is that sort of, how did you do it? Like, so I mean, I know you said you had that honest conversation and with your departure, and the connections that you made, they were many of them were still there when you returned, or like
some of them were still there. Some of them moved into different roles. I came into I ended up coming back into a group that I had originally started with at EA, the Need for Speed franchise. But it was a situation where pretty much everyone that I worked with on the original Need for Speed term, or like the time I was working on that franchise, they had all gone off to do different things, be it
Well, the Black Box
off
team, essentially, a lot of them went to next level games, or the was there? I'm trying to remember what the downtowns.
Well, that was so a number of the people that formed Black Box, some of them were former EA,
Right.
and then some of them were people from other groups, be it Radical or a couple of the other companies around there. So they started up Black Box, and then EA came in and bought Black Box after seeing what they could do with Need for Speed.
Right.
So I joined the Black Box group in downtown, but then made my way back to EAC when they decided to just put everything together in one studio again.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Sorry for derailing you there. I caught that note
Oh, no
about
worries.
that. Was their return? I'm like, so you're obviously a nice enough guy. They wanted to work with you again. So it's.
I definitely believe that honesty and communication is something that, on the most part, people very much take at face value, and that if you're straightforward and say, look, this is why I'm leaving, it gives the company an opportunity, hopefully, to want to better themselves. If they're leaving for a particular reason that is more company influenced, or if it's a personal one, you can say, look, I very much enjoyed my time. It's actually nothing to do with the company itself. I'm just looking for either a different opportunity for myself or someone in my family or such.
Well, and also, again, the partner side of that's really important too, because it's like, many of us as individuals, you kind of you're focused on your career, but many of us partner up too, and it's like, and you have family, and those life often directs a lot of those changes too. So it's whether it's lifestyle or meeting the needs of a partner or extended family in that regard. And there's obviously opportunities. Just when we speak of BC, I mean, you were here in the mainland, you were on Vancouver Island, and now you're in the interior, right? So it's
it's like I said, it's been a bit of an interesting journey around. And a lot of the decisions that were made recently were actually more family based. So when we moved from Ontario back to BC, that one was a combination. What the company wanted to do that I was with at the time, Capcom, wanted to do from a strategic perspective. They wanted to have all of their development in one similar location.
Was that the Beeline studio?
Yeah, so Beeline was the mobile division for Capcom.
Right.
So I started off as an executive producer with Beeline in Toronto and rose up to VP of product development. So they actually asked me to close down the Toronto studio and then start up a new one in Vancouver, which is what I did. But part of the reason for accepting that was the opportunity to come back and be closer to my partner's family.
Nice. No, that's really cool. And it's kind of, I was, again, ahead of this call, I was kind of reminiscing on some of the history here too. So with Rob Barrett and Blue Castle Games, and even going to where Penny was at, I used to do PR, and I worked for Edelman, and Capcom was my client, as was Nexon and Slant 6. But with Rob and Blue Castle, they got acquired by Capcom, right? So so just for those of you on the call too, this is sort of just a bit of a segue, but Rob Barrett is somebody else that Dave's worked with, not only I guess with the Capcom hat on, but in the themed attraction. What was
he was not an active member of that. He was still part of one of the co-owners at some level, but he wasn't an active.
But just the connections of just like that, this web, because now Rob is working at EA. So he's a senior development director at Electronic Arts, right? So that
it is exactly, Dave. Even though the number of people that are part of the games industry as a whole, I still find it to be a very small industry.
Yeah.
And that it may not be a case of somebody directly, but chances are you both know somebody in common. And that's one of the things, as you're going through your career inside the games industry, your personal relationships, how you hold yourself as a person while working, how you interact with other people, it matters. And as you go along, that has the potential to follow you, either positively or negatively.
Yeah, no, that's true. And then just following this too. So you were in the game space. You were, in the early 16-bit days to working your way up to, we'll say more current gen. But then, this move into the island when you did the themed attraction, was that looking at immersive, like was that VR, XR, theater, like did that draw on your theater background? Like what was that particular role in that?
For me, that was an opportunity to explore where games and entertainment could be going in the future, and I think in many ways is going to be helping expand what games actually mean. So we were using, as part of those, game engines. One of the things we did used in it Unity, the other one used Unreal. So to talk through what the projects were that the company did, the most basic version that they did was basically an interactive or loosely interactive theater. Like you were sitting in movie, it was like you're sitting in a movie theater with a film playing, except for you had VR headset on. And so the chairs would move as you went through the film. There wasn't that much interaction other than, moving your head around a bit. But it was, a very tame ride when it comes to VR, AR as compared to some of the stuff we were doing later. But that was our first introduction into bringing VR into a themed entertainment. The next thing we did was an attraction for Lionsgate. They have a theme park, or they licensed a theme park in Zhuhai, China. And so we did an attraction based on the Twilight IP, where we took a motorcycle, and they were actually real dirt bikes, but put them onto a 3 degrees of motion base, meaning that you get actually a little bit of tilt, the bike would lean back. And then it was a VR experience, so you were actually riding on your motorcycle throughout an experience. And we had force feedback inside the bike itself, so you actually feel it as you went to different surfaces. We had a wooden bridge that had gaps between each of the logs, so you actually felt it as you bumped your way along. Force feedback, so when you were riding on sand, you'd actually feel the difficulty in steering. And it was yourself and 3 others in that same experience. So you could actually look over at the people that you were actually physically in the space with, but inside the experience. So you could, take different paths and ride side by side, or experience different things in different directions. And that was a huge hit for the park. But the one that is getting a lot more attention right now, yes, it is Lionsgate Entertainment World. The one that we're getting the most attention about right now, we did the software for Mario Kart, the ride at Universal Studios in Osaka, Japan. So this is an AR attraction where yourself and 3 other guests are in a cart that goes around a space that has, the physical objects that you'd see inside a Mario world, the piranha plants, the big blocks. But in AR, you see all of the other riders, and you can race another cart with 4 other people, and you fire fireballs at Bowser and try and win the race against the other car. But again, those are all about taking game technology, game types of experiences, and bringing that to the theme park and trying to raise the level of what experiences could be.
That's really cool. And it's kind of related to something we have happening on campus right now. I don't know if you've heard of the Immersive Tech group, but they're doing container-based VR with
yeah. That's is that with Tim
Bieber? Yeah, exactly. Okay, there's small world stuff there too. So they are actually one of our tenants now. They moved into the building next door in the 577, and they have one of those containers with 3 bays, VR and other devices in place. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that evolves. But and I guess they've went public, or they've got a raise and they're moving forward. But I guess the last year must have been challenging in that space with the pandemic and everything that on the.
So the pandemic effectively wiped out Dreamcraft.
Yeah.
We had 60 odd people. I think there are 3 people at the moment.
Yeah. Which again, that's part of, sometimes it's timing, and it's just, and these things happen. I mean, and again, this is leading towards where you're at now. And one of the really cool stories that I find about Hyper Hippo, like it's again, for those of you on the call, I mean, this company, so Lance Preeb, he was one of the founders of Club Penguin, right? Who, Club Penguin was a company that was also in Kelowna, right? Wasn't that the origin story? It started there, and Disney essentially acquired them for about $700 million. If that's my historical, I don't have a webpage in front of me. I'm just trying to go with memory here, but a lot of money. And then when Hyper Hippo got off the ground, they got a certain amount of runway, or like a $5 million to kind of just do something. And there was Mech Mice was the game that they were working on.
Yeah.
Right.
So as you said, the game Hyper Hippo started off by Lance, which has another little twist.
Okay.
Lance is an investor in Immersive Tech and is on the board of advisors for Tim. So
that's right. Actually, you know what I did? There we go. There's everything is connected. You're in the matrix now, folks. This is that is crazy. But yeah, so but again on that, so I guess it was leading into that story with, I know that Dreamcraft had the challenges there, and also like, I mean, you left the island, came back to the mainland, moved to join this company, but that company had they were on the brink, right? Wasn't that the?
They very much were. They very much were. And the funny story is that Mech Mice wasn't doing well. They're trying to figure out, well, what are we going to do? It was basically an all hands approach of let's figure something out. So people were trying out different prototypes. This one person had a concept. I was like, I think this would work. I need to find somebody to help me make this work. Everybody thought that the idea was just ludicrous, so they wouldn't help him. So he went and learned Unity himself. Took a little time, figured it out, and then made a early prototype of Adventure Capitalist. And people were still thinking this is the most stupidest thing. It's ridiculous, and just gave it to people and said, just try it. Just please, just try it. And everyone expected that they give them the feedback. This is the stupidest thing, but what happened was no one could stop playing. They were still probably saying this is the stupidest thing while they're sitting there pressing the buttons. But it turned out to be the thing that kind of really kicked off Hyper Hippo. And at that time, we were working with external partners to help publish. So Congregate published Adventure Capitalist for a long time, but over the last few years, we've been taking over as publisher and now self-published as well. But yeah, we've been working on a lot of games inside of the idle space. That's an area that we think we have a lot of strength. But we're also trying out some new things right now as well. We've got a game that's in not quite soft launch yet, but we refer to as Kpi testing. So we're just trying to see what, pardon me, the initial engagement is in day 1, day 2. And we've had a fantastic surprise with that, where we released it in a couple of countries. We decided we're only going to put a tiny bit of user acquisition money behind it just to see what people were doing as they went through the Fatui funnel. And then we started seeing the game showing up in countries all around the world. People were going out of their way to find it. And I've been downloading it and been playing it. So awesome. We're now in the unfortunate position of like, well, we got to finish making the game first before we can ship it. So that's one of the things we're madly working on right now, is finishing that up and hoping to get that out in the soft launch shortly.
That's cool. I'm going to give you a breather, but I'm also going to give some backgrounders for others on the call. So going back to the origin stories with Hyper Hippo. So it's kind of sums up in a great video on their site, but essentially they had about $5 million to work towards producing Mech Mice, which was to be this transmedia property, mice and mech and graphic novel and animate, like all these pieces. worked on this game and then released, and it did about 200,000 in sales or something like that. But that $5 million was essentially burned through. They had a little bit of rope at the end, and so they put it to the team to say, make what you want, but get feedback as early as you can, right? So that led to essentially your Unity, hey, try my adventure capitalist thing here, that people couldn't put down, right? So, and then it has about 50 million unique installs or something, and crazy like that. So again, from ashes, it's, you know, it's very Phoenix-like here. I mean, it's kind of like the company's done well, and it sounds like they drank the Kool-Aid as far as, you know, embracing that idea now, because you're saying that you're testing something, getting the feedback, you're finding it in other countries, and you're going to further develop it. That's a good approach, because that's something else we try to teach in the program. I'm just bringing this up as sort of a teaching moment. Don't spend your $5 million before you find that your end user, your audience. You want to get that, you know, make sure that the market's there first, right, as best you can.
Yep.
And
I give an example at Zynga. I was working on creating a new property for Zynga, and the first moment that we were doing user testing for it was when we had a 2-line description of the concept and 3 pieces of art. And we basically said, tell us what you think this 2-line description actually means. And then once you have that from them, we said, well, which of these art pieces line up with that? And fortunately for us, they came back with, you know, yeah, this is what we think it means, and this is the art direction we think best aligns with that. But that was a case of, you know, we were testing with actual users at the point where it was just a description and some art concepts.
Oh, that's really cool. So that was sort of part of your pitch process internally, as far as like you just start really, you know, 2-liners, some images, and see what syncs. Is that
it was a little bit past the pitch process, the internal pitch process.
Right.
So we were working on some prototypes. I actually created a few levels of the game inside a program that at the time was meant to draw UX flows. But I actually built out so that a couple people could actually play the game on one phone, hand it back and forth, and actually play it. I was told by that company that I broke the program because I had too many screens in there. But
hey, that's hacking. That's you're doing what you can to get the that's
absolutely, yeah. Like that the early feedback you want to get around games, especially, is that, you know, how does it feel? What's that tactile experience for playing something?
Yeah.
Much more so than, you know, the pretty graphics.
Cool. Well, I did want to know, because I just kept caught that through our conversation, there were some questions in the chat. So this is kind of going back a little bit, but there was a question about how was the experience working with the team in Japan? Did you have to overcome any barriers to communicate?
It was an indirect communication on the most part, in that we were working with Universal, and then Universal handled most of the communication with Nintendo. There were a few times when, especially when we were demoing the product on site in Osaka, where we had Nintendo folks coming by, that there were a few direct conversations, but most of the relationship was actually handled by Universal instead of us.
Now I'm going to ask a question to this too. So how did you treat working with the IP? Were you like heavily NDA'd? Were you able to?
We weren't allowed to say anything.
Yeah.
And like if I had guests coming into the studio, we basically curtained off what people were working on. Like we had a test buck. We did everything in VR first before AR, because obviously we didn't have the physical environment there. So we had everything in VR, but that was all blocked off so that if someone was coming in, they couldn't see it. And it was the same with the Lionsgate work as well.
And again, I'm bringing this up sort of with an alter, you know, because we do in our R&D that we do within the center, we have in the past worked on some heavily NDA products. We've used gray boxing, you know, placeholder assets, other ways to showcase, you know, what was happening without disclosing the secret sauce. So one of them was the mainframe. So we worked on the reboot of Reboot. So the game elements. So Dave Fracchia, this actually goes back to his connection to mainframe and Reboot. but yeah, we happened to work on a reboot of Reboot, and then we'd worked on a Pac-Man, like a Namco thing. So this is to say to the students on the call, you may be working on projects that are connected to some IPs or have NDA elements. There's still ways of working forward, and even, but yeah, I've seen many a studio block out, shade, use other.
So when I was working on Need for Speed, Nissan had hinted at the fact that they were releasing the new Nissan GTR. And they had given some looks in terms of what the final product was going to look like with their concept vehicle. And so in the version of Need for Speed that we released, we had that concept vehicle inside the game. People were playing it. But on the day that Nissan released the actual GTR, we swapped in the game to the actual GTR. So we had the full specs for that car before, there were a handful of people outside of Nissan that actually knew about what the actual specs for that car were. That was something that was like the engine specs in terms of horsepower, torque, and what the torque curve looked like in that was handwritten out and was put into a FedEx and was sent to me, and I had to have that under lock and key at all times. There were only myself, the software engineer that was doing the programming for that particular car, and the person that was doing the tuning for the cars. We were the only ones that actually knew all those specs. And then we had a similar situation where for modeling of that particular car, there were only a couple people that were actually able to work on it, and it was in a separate area.
Yeah, no, which is great. And again, it's good for everyone to be aware of that. And I'm just seeing Dave's note here too, just on the when he was working with Radical on the development of Destiny, they had to protect from drones looking in the window. Oh yeah, people will go to all ends there, I guess, to get a sneak peek, right? So it's got to be protective of those. Yeah.
Fortunately, I never had to battle against drones.
I know. That was new to me too. That's a piece of Dave's history I didn't really, other Dave's history that I didn't know. So thanks for that. And I liked his of mice and mech. That's a
yes, I did see that. That was
nice.
Well done,
that's great.
Well done.
But actually, on that note, so going back to the questions in the chat, and this goes back to some of our conversation earlier related to the VR AR virtual film production. So I guess more Dreamcraft. But what skill sets do students need to prepare to join those kind of teams as a designer? So if they're, as a designer, if they were to approach a Dreamcraft or I guess immersive tech, if Lance's investment, pays off with our neighbor tech in the parking lot, and your history as being a design director yourself there, what should they be, how should they position themselves as a designer familiar in that space?
VR and AR offer some really interesting challenges. Even if you look at VR just as a pure, if you're looking at just from a viewer's perspective. So when you're creating a film, you know exactly where a player's eye is going to be at all times. You can put a shiny object over here and you can pretty much guarantee that, yeah, people's eyes will go over there. The problem is in VR is that you can have a shiny object here, but the player could be looking over there. So a lot of the design cues that we would use in terms of making sure we knew where the player's eyes were, where they're focused on, what kind of feedback they were getting at all times, you kind of have to look at it from a different perspective in that regard. Motion is also something that is a completely different tool set. So when working on Need for Speed, for example, to help accentuate the sense of speed, we would play with the cameras. And when we're accelerating, we'd pull the camera back a little bit. When braking, we would crash the camera forward, help get the sense of speed. You do that in VR, your players will puke, guaranteed. So having an understanding of motion and how the body physically reacts inside a space where like the body is used to so many pieces of information, not just what they're seeing, but what you're hearing, what you're smelling, what you're feeling, not just through your fingertips, but throughout your entire body. Those are all things that help ground you in your reality. So The brain is fine with having a reality that's displayed in front of a TV where you're flying through space, because they can take all the other inputs and go, okay, well, I know that what I'm watching is on a TV, but I'm grounded in space. But inside VR, you have lost a lot of that. So when we were doing experiences, for example, on the motorcycle, and the player was speeding up inside the world, we had fans blowing wind on the player to help with that sense of immersion. So the brain went, yeah, okay, I'm traveling fast at this point, because we wanted to have the senses agree with what they were seeing enough that the player was immersed. So the brain was going, okay, I feel all right. Nothing really weird's happening. I can enjoy what I'm seeing, and therefore they're not throwing up all over the place. So, having a really good understanding of that relationship between what is going on inside the space and what the player is doing is something that's basically your first lesson you need to deal with. It's like if you play Arizona Sunshine, for example, as you're traveling through the world, you're not holding your stick forward to actually walk through the world. You're saying, I want to go there, and you teleport there. But that's the reason why, is because there's no way to easily get that sensation of walking inside the body that matches what the player is seeing inside the mind. So navigation, cues around what that space is, what you're trying to look at, what the player should be looking at, what they're doing. Those are all new challenges as compared to what you'd see inside PC or console or mobile gaming. The one piece of advice I always give to anybody looking at any particular space is play, 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 play as much as you possibly can. And not just the things that are necessarily directly associated with what you're doing, but even try other things. So VR, if you're playing games, try some of the fitness applications of the VR, because they're also trying to do things where immersing people inside the world, trying to make something that is repetitive and some people find really boring, really exciting and fun and engaging. So what are the things you can potentially borrow from those things and bring them into the experiences you're working on? Even like the case of, so I worked on SSX, and I was responsible for taking it from individual plays. So it was all menu based. You said, I want to go play this track, and then you went to Tokyo and you did some tricks, then you got to the bottom and you went back to a menu. I was the one that put it into a giant world. So it was one giant mountain that you could ride from one course to another all the way down. The inspiration for that was actually games like, is it Gex? Was it Gex, Dave? Was that one of the first ones? One of the first 3D worlds where you loaded a world, and then, anyways, I took inspiration from. Yeah, I know we have hard times remembering that far back. Yeah, I took inspiration from platform games in terms of what you could do inside worlds, because they had moved away from having just a contained world and then back to a menu. They went to a situation where they had world and then a section of world where it loaded in the next chunk of world and kept on going. So it was a much more expansive, a much more immersive experience. So I stole that concept and applied it to a snowboarding game.
You borrowed, you were inspired by.
I was inspired by.
Yeah, there you go. But yeah, so another note or connection to that, the SSX snowboarding game was an awesome game. Steve Reckschaffner is going to be a guest coming up. He's been faculty with us in the past, and for those of you on the call too, so Steve, he's also started his own game company again called Supernatural Games, but degrees of connection because he was also at EA and also on SSX.
Yeah, so he was the EP. Him and I had some interesting discussions during the course of SSX3 because, no, I won't tell those stories.
No, it's okay, exactly.
Well, okay, so at that time, EA was about packaged goods. So what was the back of the box look? What does the back of the box look like? So at that time, there wasn't a lot of as much emphasis on trailers to watch on YouTube because, well, it wasn't, I'm not even sure if it really was a thing at that point yet, but it was about what were the things that are in the back of the box? What are your top 5 features in the back of the box? When SSX3 started off, it was meant to be track-based, similar to what Tricky and the original was like. And so that was a discussion between myself and him. And I said, hey, I'd like to try this. And he went, no. Mm. And I still distinctly remember we were in a meeting room. He drew on a whiteboard. He drew 9 small boxes and he drew 1 big box. And he said that, you know, from a consumer's perspective, and he's a really smart marketer. I mean, he worked with Swatch. He worked with a number of companies. Smart guy. He said, people always see those 9 small things as being more valuable than 1 large thing. So I understood that. He made an excellent point. I thought in order to make sure that we were progressing the game forward, that we should try and push through that, which is why. So we ended up, while we were trying to figure out how do we make this as a track-based game, we made a prototype on the side to figure out how could we do the streaming to make the 1 mountain. So then we ended up taking those tracks and combining them into 1 space.
There you go. That's putting the pieces together, or the boxes in this scenario. So, yeah. No, that's awesome. Oh, and actually, yeah, getting some other endorsements on SSX was awesome. Tricky and On Tour were great. Yeah, so some people on the call kind of get it. Oh, and I'm seeing a hand up here too. So we are kind of coming into some Q&A time here too. Simran, you got one for us?
Yep. Hi, Dave. This is Simran. So I completed my undergrad in chemical engineering from India, but I never pursued in that. I learned how to make alcohol, paint industry, pharmaceuticals, all that stuff. But I entered into the startup environment very early in 2015. So I worked as a business analyst, project manager, and product manager for last 5 years. But I worked in education technology, edtech, into automobile sector in building CRMs for the big brands like Toyota, Mercedes, and all those. But I'm really interested in entertainment industry, especially movies and games, immersive media. So my question is, what skill sets would you recommend, and what portfolio I should have on what projects I should have on my portfolio that will help me to transit or to pivot into the entertainment industry after the MTM program or within the MTM?
Fantastic question. I think part of it depends on which area you want to go in. So if you look at virtual production, you know, a gaming environment is very much a key part of what it is that they're doing. You know, they're running Unreal as their main base engine. The concepts and some of the pipelines in order for content to come in, you know, very similar. Obviously, the difference is the projection and, you know, the actual final use case, but a good understanding of the core technology certainly is part of that. Like some of the stuff that I was doing at Dreamcraft, for example, had use cases outside of themed entertainment. We were doing digital humans, and it was part of a virtual production workflow. In terms of, sorry, just to, are you interested in project management? Are you interested in product management? Like, is there a particular
product management to be specific?
Okay. Product. And it's in entertainment. So if it was games, I would say, you know, how well do you know your data pipelines? Because product managers, especially in live ops, spend their time there a lot. Product management inside entertainment. In some ways, you're asking a lot of the same questions in terms of what is it that you want as that best user's experience, and what is going to be the return for the company working on that. So if it's a case where it is a product that you're trying to monetize, you know, what is that exchange that you're hoping to have, and what is that quality level bar that you're trying to get that exchange for. If it is a virtual production environment, really at that point, you're looking more at what your workflows look like and the quality of the imagery that you're able to put up, both from the content side of things as well as the equipment that's being used. That's about as far as I'd venture to say, suggestion-wise. There are a number of companies in Vancouver that are doing virtual production, if that's more of a direction you're interested in going. Honestly, I'd try reaching out to some of them directly. You may find that some of them would be more than willing to talk about, what is it that they're looking for. Honestly, I'd even just start looking at what some of the job postings are and see what is it that they're asking for as a starting point. Yeah, I wish I could be more helpful, but
Okay.
that area, that's not exactly my sweet spot in terms of experience. So.
But you've made some great points already too, in saying, like, talking about getting into a specific space, play the games, live it, be familiar with it, right? So I think everyone here has a unique background, and there's those that are going to be looking at, changing directions somewhat, but it also complements your background, right? So I think to Dave's point, you got a theater background and you're able to leverage that for your path, right? So I do think, Simran, like, your background is going to complement a lot of the things that you're looking to do, and looking at, what you've done, but also what you're going to do next. So obviously the project work you take on, that's going to be a part of it, but your side projects, if you want to, visit some of the studios that are in town that are in this space, we have alumni likely that work at some of these companies. To Dave's point, if you find job descriptions on sites, print them off or make a PDF of them, because they may not live on the site forever, but that'll help you when you start putting your future portfolios together. So you'll have some references, right? Some source material. And Dave is actively working with all of our interns right now, so I'm sure you'll sing the praises. Other Dave, Mr. Fracky, you got something to say here? Jump in.
Oh, just really quickly, I think what's important to realize, and the other Dave, the better Dave, can also say something as well. Hi, Dave. Which is when you're switching spaces, especially to something which is quite idiosyncratic, like games or animation, you sometimes have to be prepared. If you're going to do that, you may have to start a little lower down the chain so you can learn the processes and the workflows. And also realize that some of the job descriptions can be different across industries. A producer, for example, at Electronic Arts is different than a producer was at Radical, right? A producer in many respects is looking at product, whereas a development director is looking at people and maybe more PM roles. Is that right, Dave?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there are some titles that are completely out of whack. Another example in terms of crossing different forms of entertainment. I'm working with some folks that are looking at moving from the film side of entertainment into games and offering publishing types of services. So how do you work with talent? How do you put together promotional strategies, things that for them they're transferable. But the really funny part was, as I was looking at their menu of services, one of their categories was production help. And for me, that goes production help. Okay, so you're talking about helping with scheduling? Are you talking about helping with defining what the product is? Oh, no, that's narrative. No, we're talking services about, how do you write stories? How do you work with talent? So it's one of those things where, okay, you need to change that title, call it narrative, don't call it production. But yeah, to Dave's point, if you were a producer at EA and you walked over to Radical and said, hey, I'd like a production job, they'd go, what type of producer do you think we're looking for? They were radically different jobs, no pun intended there.
So true, nice. I see what you did there. But yeah, producers specifically in games, animation, film, very, very different definitions and on the task or the expectations on the role, right? So know the industry that you're applying to. Make sure that your portfolios reflect that too. So again, going back to original Dave, guest speaker Dave, the point about being familiar with the space, like you're going to want to be able to speak the terminology, be familiar with, what will be relevant to the employers you're going to be connecting with. I do want to put I do see there's a hand up, but I also wanted to get Ugo's question. Is Ugo still in Africa? I believe he's the guy that's like 2 a.m. for him. So his question always gets asked on camera when I see it. He did ask, does knowledge in ergonomics, could it be useful as a project manager in VR related to projects? So that, I don't know if he's personally got a background in ergonomics, but there's the question. I'm assuming yes, but I'm going to put it to the Daves.
Yeah, I would say obviously to a degree, because VR games you're either standing or you're sitting, but in reality, ideally you don't really have much around you. So the ergonomics is more about how is it you're expecting the person to move their body inside that space. Pistol Whip is a great example, choosing a BC company.
Nice.
In terms of how you actually move inside of a space and having an understanding of what that actually means when your eyes are covered, you don't know exactly where your hands are inside the world. So having a good understanding of what you're asking the person to do inside that space, and the expectations of what actually can be done with the human body, given that they don't know what's around them, is very important. So you never want to have geometry inside your world that would put people off balance, because then they have the opportunity to tumble over, hit their head on a table they didn't know was there, and so forth. But yeah, if you're inside a location-based entertainment, that's when you have more opportunities inside VR to add in more elements that help, where ergonomics would definitely take more of a play. Because you could be trying to recreate an actual environment. So I was working with one company that was basically trying to design vehicles, but doing design inside VR. So having an understanding of how you move inside of a car, how you open and close the door inside VR, definitely is impactful.
All right, Dave, I'm hitting rapid fire question round here because I got to close this
do
off
it.
before we get Jason Elliott's teaching tonight at 7. So, but I did see 3 hands go up. So it was Asher,
Yep.
Mayor, and Yichin. So I'm going to go with Asher first. Question, Dave, answer, and then we're going to move on. So, Asher.
Okay. Hi, Dave, and hi, Dave. I mean, both Dave. Yeah, I would like to ask that, based on your knowledge about the game industry, will there be many, entrance level positions? For example, I'm interested about the game designers and like the level designers available in Vancouver for students who just graduate, like us graduating from CDM in 2023, because I know that the Montreal has many very developed game industry, and there are a lot of game companies there, compared to Vancouver. So I do some research about like EUA, that it seems like they prefer to hire the experienced designer, for example, 3 to 5 years experience, or I just a little bit curious about these questions.
Yep.
Or do you have any campus recruitment or something like that? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Absolutely.
You.
So funny enough, there are a couple of things that take into account, or you need to take into account when it comes to experience. Right now, because of the pandemic, more companies will ask for people to have experience rather than junior, because it's a lot harder to mentor somebody if you're not sitting beside them physically and being able to look over your shoulder and be able to offer that guidance on a moment-to-moment basis. So some companies are a little bit more reluctant to bring on junior staff versus mid-level or senior staff where they know that there's a basic level. The other part is also where in the cycle are companies in terms of M&A, in that you will find that the games industry expands and contracts. So right now there's a lot of purchasing of companies that is happening. I can guarantee you within a year or two, you're going to find a whole bunch of new companies starting to occur, because people will join a company, work with them for a little while and go, I can do things better, and then start up something new. Money fortunately happens to be really cheap right now, so it's easier for people to start something up for other companies to help support them.
Okay, that was rapid fire question number one. I'm going to cut you down because I have to do
sorry.
this.
I'll be more.
Short answer is there are opportunities for juniors in Vancouver. Don't leave us for Montreal. That's my plug for
Do
Vancouver.
not leave us for Montreal. I believe that there will be, as COVID starts to wind down, there will be more junior positions will open up.
Awesome. All right, Mayor, you're up.
Hello. Hi. Yeah, first of all, thanks, Dave, for telling us about your experience in the industry and you know, talking to us about all this. I wanted to know, you know, how much is engine knowledge transferable from studio to studio, given that some studios use proprietary engines, and also, you know, how do you recommend we adjust to those changes if, you know, we work in some type of software and then now we need to work in something else?
I'd say overall, more and more studios are using off-the-shelf solutions. It's really expensive to make their own engine. So you're only really going to see it in large companies like EA, where they've got Frostbite. But even some of the larger ones, they'll be using either Unreal or Unity on the most part. As for transferable, generally they are fairly transferable. Some of the areas, you know, become a little bit more difficult, but on the most part, it's just you're only learning a little bit versus learning a lot. So rendering, for example, between Unreal and Unity, you're going to be learning a bit. And code base, underlying code base. But on the most part, either Unity or Unreal, and on the most part, transferable.
Can I ask a follow-up?
You can quick if it's short.
It's
Yes.
really short. Do you recommend we kind of, you know, put more time in one or the other, or just kind of try and divvy up which, you know, the different software?
At this point, you'll find more studios using Unity over Unreal, unless you are shooting for the highest end graphics, in which case that is Unreal.
Great answer, Dave. That's awesome. All right, closing question here. Ishan.
Oh, hi. Thank you for coming. So I'm a 3D artist. I have two questions. And so while I'm preparing my portfolio, I kind of have target company. So should I just go with the style I do best and create something with best quality on that, or I take like reference from those companies, those my target companies, and kind of pursue that kind of style?
The very quick version, if you have a limited range, initially I would suggest a little bit, if you can find companies that are a little bit closer to what your range is. But that's not, I'm not going to suggest that is an exclusive answer, just because there are times when companies are making changes, they are looking to move beyond what it is that they're doing. My company, as an example, most of my games are inside the adventure brand and they have certain look and feel. The game that's I mentioned before, that's going crazy around the world, looks completely different. So, you know, we'd be looking for something else, but I'd say you'll get probably better responses because you're the hiring manager will have a particular style in mind, and if you're able to match up directly, it'll be a little bit easier for you to get in. But that's not saying that that would be the only avenue, but I think that's where you put your first focus.
Okay, thank you. So my second question is, I see lots of companies nowadays do like outsourcing thing, and they don't hire much. And they don't hire many on-site 3D artists or asset artists, especially like under pandemic when people like prefer working remotely. So what's your like observation on this?
It depends on the situation for the studio. So studios where their requirements for art goes up and down are more likely to go to outsourcing, or if they need to rapidly scale, they'll probably go to outsourcing because it is really hard to hire a lot of people very fast all at once. And B, you don't really want to have a lot of overhead over a large period of time if you're not going to use them. But there are some situations where people want to have 100% control over the quality, style, and the art pipeline, in which case they will be hiring internally. For some of my games, it's 100% internal. I've got a couple of games that I will staff some of that artwork through external. So it's situational. It depends on what the needs are for the studio.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
No, that's great. And there are a number of studios that like to hire 3D artists for
Oh,
roles
100%.
within.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was just saying, even from experience, just in this last week, I've had 2 different companies specifically reach out to me for alumni connections that are 3D artists for full-time roles.
Yeah.
So it's
If
just
you are a tech artist, 3D artist, you're good. You will be
Oh,
able
yeah.
to find spots in Vancouver without a problem.
embrace the tech. All right, so Dave's and everyone else whose name is not Dave on the call, we're going to end it here because Jason's got a class coming up, and I know I've been down to the wire before, and I don't want to do that to any of you that may have class coming up. Dave, thank you. Other Dave, thank you as well. Everyone not named Dave, thank you. Yeah, that's our Dave session for to Dave. So
Wow. That's how you did that. It's been my pleasure. More than happy to do it anytime.
thank you. And I'm just realizing how dark it's getting. I'm sitting in my second room and I'm like, I'm turning into a ghost here. So that's obviously a sign. Josh, hey, thanks as usual being there as well. Everyone, have a great evening. Till next time.
Thank you.
All
Say
right.
hi to,
Thank
say
you.
hi to Jason
you.
for me.
Will do. Yes. Yep. All right. See y'all.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.